this lecture, I want to talk about advocating for women leaders. As we've talked about already in this class, what does it look like for us to recognize that there is a power differential? And as we look back on history and leadership, that women are in a spot where needing to be advocated for is still where we are at. And so as I talk about what it means to advocate for women leaders, I'm speaking to other women like myself, as well as to men in the different spaces that you find yourselves in. As we talk about this, think about what it looks like for you to advocate for the women leaders in your life. And I mean in your entire life. I don't just mean in one area of your life like your vocation. Consider what this might mean for you in all the various spaces you find yourself having influence. I would say that it is good for all of us when we see other people thrive. And so when we see women begin to thrive more and more or continue to thrive in the spaces that they find themselves in, this is good for all of us. And so there's times when you've maybe seen that there's women in your life who have been held back in different areas when you look around at society and we look at leadership. And if you haven't noticed that, then some of this part of advocating is paying even more attention to what that might look like in the spaces that we find ourselves. Sometimes there's an assumption that, oh, this isn't a problem here. And if we were just to be willing to say, well, how might it be a problem? How might we notice that women are being held back from all of their potential in the spaces that we find ourselves in? When we do that, then we are stepping into being an ally for other women or men for women in your life. And being that type of ally is somebody who takes intentional steps to encourage other people to grow in their leadership. There's a term that I often use for this. My friend Joe Saxon and I have developed this resource, and we have it available for you all here on how to advocate for women leaders. And so you can grab that PDF resource that kind of walks through what I want to walk through today. And one of the things that we talk about is what it looks like to support people, but also to be a sponsor, and so there's a lot of different people who have talked about this concept. But when we talk about being a sponsor, what we mean is that someone who lends their credibility, connections, and authority to help other people advance. Someone who lends their credibility, connections, and authority to help other people advance. So sponsorship is a specific type of empowerment. So there's kind of a four-step process that my friend Joe and I have kind of outlined to say, what are some practical examples of how to be a sponsor, of how to be an advocate for other women or for women in your life? And they all start with S, because why not? Okay, so the first one is C. And there's points underneath those, and they start with an S too. Why not? So first step is to see. When it comes to seeing, what we're talking about is being willing to open up our eyes and to pay attention to what's happening right around us. To do that, you would surround yourself with diverse leaders. People that you're reading, people that you're learning from, people whose podcasts that you listen to, folks who influence in the different area and the different sphere that you work in, whether it's ministry or in the marketplace. Who are you looking at for your wisdom? Does this group of leaders that you're looking at look like a diverse group of leaders, and does it include some female voices? The reality is that implicit bias causes nearly all of us to automatically seek out people who are similar to us. This is not inherently bad, but when we don't recognize it, it can lead to, first of all, just not as rich of a resource and understanding of all that is available to us when it comes to the different voices and different influences that we can have. When we look for people as mentors, and when we look at people to invest in, all of us tend to look towards people who are similar to us. So look around and see the women that are already operating in your sphere of influence. Chances are there are some that maybe we haven't even noticed. And consider their leadership potential. Who are the emerging female leaders that you can invest in and see that you might invite into your team? When I'm engaging with different leaders, what I often hear from them is, well, I want to empower, I want to advocate different women leaders, but I just don't know very many, or I haven't seen very many. And that's what we mean by seeing and surrounding yourself with a diverse set of leaders, because that's going to open up your eyes to the types of folks that might be right around you that you can empower. And then the second part of C is to show by example. Insofar as it depends on you, be intentional to seek out and surround yourself with these excellent leaders that are women who are leading in ways that you see as excellent. Who are women that you respect? Who are people that you can learn from? When it comes to empowering other women, it starts first by being people who have been empowered by women. For all of us, as women and as men, who are the women who have empowered us, who we've learned from, who we can metaphorically sit at their feet and learn from in those spaces? How can you invest in that aspect of your leadership so that you can be someone who can invest intentionally in the women that you see around you? Leading not only by word, but also by example. So that's the first step, C. The second step is support. Support. So there's just a few different ways to think about supporting. First, specific encouragement and feedback. Specific encouragement and feedback. Now, encouragement is important for both male and female leaders, of course. However, since women face different barriers in leadership, thoughtful and specific encouragement is helpful, but also it can increase their growth in ways that they're affirmed when maybe that has been missing. At the same time, one thing that some female leaders lack is actual intentional constructive feedback. Because the women haven't necessarily had as many opportunities for leadership growth, it means that sometimes, a healthy critical feedback that's very constructive hasn't been offered to them as well. Also, because some of you are trying to empower women leaders, there's a desire to be really careful to make sure that you're not putting somebody down unnecessarily. However, for women out there and for those of you who are empowering and advocating for women, I want to encourage you to ask, hey, can I give you some specific feedback because I want you to grow? I remember a conversation I had with a man who's a mentor of mine. And he has been a great, encouraging mentor to me. And I said to him at one point, I want you to say to me anything that you would say to one of the male leaders that you are investing in. Just because I had a sense, I wonder if he's holding back. And you know what he said? He said, are you sure? Are you sure you want to hear that specific feedback? And I had to think for a minute. And I said, yeah, I do want to hear that. What he was trying to do there was to be protective of my, needing encouragement and recognizing that for me as a woman, there haven't always been as much encouragement. And so he wanted to be careful not to overstep the line and give criticism or constructive feedback that I might take the wrong way. But because we had grown in a trusted relationship of empowerment, and because I asked and he said, are you sure? And there was a consent there for the feedback he was going to give. He gave me some great thoughts and asked me some really good questions that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't had that conversation with him. And so I want to encourage you to say, what would it look like to maybe ask if you can give feedback and what it might look like to come alongside people and see when you're giving that feedback, remind them it's because you see their leadership skills and their potential that you want to give that feedback. And then make sure also that it's constructive and helpful and specific. The second thing in support is just to stay persistent. Stay persistent. Studies have shown that those who have not felt well represented in different spaces will be reluctant to step into opportunities when they're initially offered. We see this not just for women, but for different people who might be a minority in their space. If they have not seen the example and representation of somebody like them leading, then sometimes when that offer is extended the first time, they're not going to come right away with a yes. Marian Wright Edelman she's an educator. She's often quoted, "It's hard to be what you can't see." It's hard to be what you can't see. And that's the truth for any of us. So with that in mind, we need to be persistent. Talk to that female leader intentionally, one-on-one, before you make an ask in front of other people, for instance. Invite them to think about it first before you even ask for an answer, and then circle back. Invite them to have a conversation with somebody else outside of that invitation to discuss whether or not it's something they might be willing to step into. And yes, it is important to respect their decision if they say they want to pass on an opportunity. But still consider her next time. Something similar comes along, next time there's another opportunity, still consider her and circle back that next time. Because while we want to respect someone's decision, absolutely, recognize that a no or a not yet or a not right now might be different in a different scenario a little bit down the line. Okay, step number 3, speak. Speak, okay? The first step in speak is to stand up and speak up for women actively and specifically. When we're a part of leadership teams and the different dynamics that are happening, we notice there's a lot of leadership dynamics that go on when we're a part of a team of leaders. And as I mentioned earlier, that implicit bias is a part of the equation. No matter who we are, we struggle when we're trying to make sure that all voices are heard. That is a universal problem. When a woman is interrupted or if her idea is repeated by somebody else and she's not given the credit, speak up when you see that happen. When a woman has worked so hard and has done a great job and it gets overlooked by the team, be the person who is going to celebrate and speak specifically a public word of praise. Yes, encourage her one-on-one, but publicly praise the work and the effort that she put in that area of leadership. Of course, when a woman is treated disrespectfully or disrespectful talk about women is happening, speak up. That is such an important thing to just say. We need to say, hey, this is not okay. Stand up for women in small ways and big ways and use your voice when you have the opportunity. And so the second part of speaking is to say their name. Say their name. When lists of speakers are being made, when ideas for leaders who could lead a committee are being brainstormed, when managers to head up a project are being discussed, suggest a woman by name. Suggest specific women by name. If a woman played a critical role in a project, mention her name, even if she's not in the room. Say, oh, this woman was a part of that project. And naming people's names in the right spaces is what's caused people to advance so many times. And because, once again, that implicit bias might not bring it to our minds right away, someone who's different than us. So for us as women and men, thinking about the other women in the spheres that we have influence in, are we saying their names in those spaces and thinking beyond just our basic bias towards who might be great in those spaces? Specifically when it comes to the spaces where decisions are being made. When it comes to networking, do you often suggest other people who are similar to you? Thoughtfully consider how you can share a woman leader's name with those when you're networking, with people where it's beneficial for them, that group that might be looking for a leader, but also beneficial for her. And if you feel like you can't name somebody because you haven't gotten to know their leadership well enough, then we're back to that other step of seeing, looking, being able to name names because you have made the investment to build those relationships. The fourth and final step is sacrifice. The first part of sacrificing is staking your reputation and power. The reality is that it can be a sacrifice to advocate for others, no matter who they are. When you're advocating for other people, other men, other leaders, other women, anybody but that's not you, that means you're not advocating for yourself in that moment. We often naturally want to advocate for ourselves, and then for the people closest to us, and then for the people most similar to us. And this isn't inherently wrong to advocate for ourselves, but it does mean that we have to take extra energy and use that energy and that effort to redirect the focus from ourselves on how we can advocate for other people and how we can advocate for women in our lives. It takes intentionality and sacrifice of not using that energy for our own gain or for the gain of the people who maybe it gains our own team, and to put that sacrifice and that energy in other ways. This is especially complicated in spaces that have been historically male-dominated when it comes to leadership. Once again, we're not saying that that's always wrong or that it got to that way, always with malintent. But if that is currently the case, where the spaces that you find yourself leading in has historically been led predominantly by men, it's going to be even more complicated to figure out what it looks like to intentionally advocate and to be people who think about how we might sacrifice for the sake of women. When you choose to leverage that power, when you choose to say, I know I have power in this situation, but I'm going to leverage it for someone else, you are letting some of that power go, and that's going to feel like a sacrifice. But it is one worth making when it is one that can grow the credibility of women, and you grow in your credibility as someone who is a sponsor and an advocate for women in those spaces. And the second part of sacrifice is stepping out of the way. It's difficult to know when to step out of the way, isn't it, as a leader? Just in general, to know when you should actually get out of the way where those who are following behind you can get some space to step up. I've noticed that certain spaces, when I walk into the room, it changes the whole dynamic. And sometimes in certain moments, the best thing that I can do is to actually get out of the room altogether so that those leaders can step up and step into the gifting that they have. And my presence actually hinders them from doing that in some way. It can also just be really difficult to know when you're supposed to get out of the way, and move to the side, create space for someone else. But this discernment is so key. And I want to encourage you to take this as a matter of prayer. Ask God to lead you in what it looks like for you as a leader to step to the side, to step out of the way, and sometimes to step all the way out of the room. That this is a type of discernment that is truly about that true empowerment that we had talked about. At times, what it takes to make sure somebody is thriving is coaching, and you stay with them, but you step to the side and invite them up next to you. At times, it's to step back and to just get out of the way altogether and be there to cheer them on. And once again, at times, your actual absence is what's going to create that space for that leader to thrive. I think it's a great feeling to create space for other people to lead, but that's not always our natural inclination. Sometimes our natural inclination is to say, I want to be able to continue to keep all of the power and authority and space and roles and opportunities to myself and create it for other people. But the truth is that so often it is actually a sacrifice to give that away to others. But I believe, and I have experienced in my own life, that there is something so special and so encouraging about being the person that got out of the way so that somebody else could thrive. And that is an opportunity that we have for other leaders and men, for leaders in your life that are women, to see them have this meaningful experience of thriving in their leadership in ways that are made possible by your willingness to sacrifice. So when it comes to advocating for women, think about how you can see, support, speak up for, and sacrifice for women in leadership. You could play a critical role in seeing women live into their potential and flourish in their leadership today and for the years to come.